Right, good evening, members, members of the public, and anyone who is coming in on Zoom. Again, remind you to make sure your microphones are fully switched on. And so have we any apologies, please?
Apologies to that, Chair, received from Councillor Ball, Councillor Cross and Councillor Paul Brown.
Thank you very much. And could we have the minutes of the meeting on the 14th of February approved? Thank you. Seconded. And all those in favour, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Any declarations of interest? Sorry, Councillor Brown.
The meeting, so I'm abstaining on that vote.
Sorry.
I wasn't at the last meeting.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Minutes, okay,
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? Item 3? Nope. Thank you very much. And we have no petitions other than the ones relating to the planning application. And so we now move on to item 5, which is the Hackney carriage and licensing policy consultation.
Yeah, Chair, we're just waiting for an officer to dial in. Who's just loading up to Zoom now. So we're going to okay with members to take the footpath one first, whilst the officer's trying to log on to the Zoom call.
So we'll take the footpath one.
Yeah, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. Mr. Cook, thank you very much. So that's page 101, the Ketton one.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Good evening. I'm here to present report number 39, 2023, which is the proposed diversion of footpath E229 in Ketton. The report sets out an application to divert a footpath under section 257 of the Town and Country Planning Act, which enables local authorities to divert or stop up footpaths to enable development to take place. The development in this place is something that the committee has already considered in 2020 and given approval to. So it is something of a formality, although government guidance is clear that just because planning permission has been granted, it shouldn't be seen as assured that that the local authority will give permission to divert the footpath, although it is usual. There are a couple of minor issues with the diversion, principally being that the diversion route is having an estate road constructed over it, which is contrary to guidance from DEFRA, or the guidance specifically being that wherever it's possible to avoid it, we should. In this case, I think it's accepted that there will have to be some coincidence of the two routes, given the difficulties with the narrow access to the site from Ketton High Street. I have spoken with the developer. There is a long-term aspiration for this route to upgrade to a bridleway, and has been since the temporary diversion of the route by Ketton Heidelberg Group, Ketton Quarry. With that in mind, the developer has agreed to extend the width of the footpath to encompass the full extent of the estate road, which would retain sufficient width if we were ever to upgrade the route to a bridleway in the future. There is one matter that we should resolve though, prior to confirming the order, and the applicant is quite happy to accept that we seek to enter into an agreement for the maintenance of the surface. Maintenance of the surface of public rights of way rests with the local authority, and obviously what's formerly sort of an informal farm track will subsequently become a surface estate road, significant additional liability to the local authority. But if we can pass that on to the developer, as they are happy to accept, I can't see any issues with that particular. And I think that's pretty much it. If there's any questions.
Councillor McCartney.
Thanks, Chair. And is the cost of that maintenance of that surface being passed by the developer onto an estate management company?
I would imagine so, but that can be dealt with through the agreement.
Okay.
Councillor Beggy,
Stuart, how long are they going to be conditioned to look after that road, or is it in perpetuity, so to speak?
We would seek, an agreement in perpetuity. And yeah, the likelihood is that we passed on to the management, the road itself, they're not seeking adoption of the road. The footpath is adopted, but we're only obliged to maintain for the normal lawful public traffic, i.e. for pedestrians. Any wear and tear caused by vehicular use, we would expect to be, expect a contribution in from the parties exercising their private rights over the road in any circumstances, but we'd rather formalise it to an agreement.
Thank you, Chair. As the ward councillor, Chair, I just want to clear a couple of points up. The big bone of contention in the village has been the issue of a specific footpath for pedestrians. That is now clarified. Is that the case? That there will be an absolute footpath for pedestrians? They will not be sharing the road with motor vehicles?
No, that is not the case. They will be sharing the route. It is a shared surface. There is no segregated route. My understanding is there wasn't sufficient room, but so my understanding, I have had to accept certain realities as an outcome of the planning process, which was obviously passed on.
Okay, if that's the case, second question, Chair, if you don't mind, and maybe Mr. Johnson might want to help in this area. Is it possible for, or the solicitor, is it possible for us to condition that they mark on that road where pedestrians have, I wouldn't say a right of way, but certainly would have priority under the road use, that pedestrians have priority over road users, vehicles, but we could mark it in such a way that vehicles would understand that they have a special priority on this particular area.
I'd have to take some further advice on how to mark that or indicate it on the site to users. However, given that the developer or the applicant is proposing to dedicate the full width of the estate road as the footpath, and the public user has priority or takes precedent over private user, over the whole full width, full length of the section, they would have priority over vehicles. How to manage that in a practical sense is obviously.
Sorry, Chairman, if it's all right, I was just going to bring back in, just because I can remember there was debate at the time when this was allowed at the planning committee, and it was discussed at that time. But the whole design ethos that we went through with this one was to have it so that it was clearly a shared surface, because we didn't want the upstand of a curb, because taken away from the design. The whole idea was that it was a shared surface, and that by being a shared surface, with not having paths, that anybody using it would be driving slowly, because of the way the whole way the road is designed, and that is an accepted, urban design way of doing things for it. So the whole design solution was based on it being a shared surface, if that helps.
It helps to some extent, but it still leaves a situation where pedestrians are fighting vehicles on that particular road. And given that we have the opportunity here tonight to look at the actual right of way aspect of it, I'm really challenging the question: can the right of way in fact be more clearly defined on the road? In other words, a white line up that road saying, little men saying, this is where you walk, so that both pedestrians know where they should walk and vehicles know that that's where pedestrians will be walking, or something similar.
Councillor Branksby.
Yes, this matter of the management company again's cropped up again. The problem is with this proposal is that you put in the actual footpath back to the residents, because they're going to have to maintain it in perpetuity. And how do you do that?
That's not that uncommon a situation. If,
I mean, to be quite honest, management company could go out of existence.
they could, but responsibility would rest with the owner of the land in any event. If I can give you a very good example. Exactly, but they would understand that on purchasing the properties. Hunts Lane in Ketton is a similar situation. It's a public footpath over which serves about 5 properties. A private road has been constructed at some point in the past.
But this is a different situation than more than 7.
I'm not sure the
Yeah,
numbers.
I think there was, I can't remember, there was 60.
It's past the driveway. For the 7 properties.
Finished.
Is it 6?
What's the answer?
It's okay.
Do you want to come back to Mr. Cook?
If the committee has particular recommendations or desires with regards to the operational sort of aspects, signage or marking, I can say fairly confidently that I think as long as they're not too onerous, the applicant would be happy to meet those requirements.
Bring the legal
No,
officer.
I'm just coming in. I was just saying that
I think the requirement should be that the first 15 years of maintenance should go to the contractor to develop.
Right. I mean, I don't think that's, unfortunately, I don't think that's I know that we have issues with management companies and I do understand that, but I think we have to, I think it's the reasonableness of what conditions or what things we're imposing. I think in terms of the signage, what I have seen is that rather than it be on the actual surface, that you could have markers that identify that it's for dual use, couldn't you, at some points? That might be something that's not going to be particularly onerous for any developer to be able to put those.
Quite reasonable, and
It is quite reasonable, that is.
I understand the reservations about management companies, but it's the same situation faced by anybody who purchases a property on a private road.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
This is no different.
And a
Slightly.
small road, yeah, and a small road like that, it just never would be adopted anyway. That, you know, if it's any service in the highways.
They've not, the applicant hasn't indicated any wish
Yeah,
to have the road
yeah.
adopted.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Well, councillor McCartney, then councillor Payne.
Thanks, Chairman. The road's not going to be adopted, but the management company will have a requirement to keep it up to a certain standard for the footpath users. So what's that standard going to be?
It is a slightly difficult situation in that the local authority does have a responsibility to maintain, but only to the standard required to enable safe passage for pedestrians. Anything over and above that is what we'll be seeking to enter into an agreement with the developers to be passed on to the management company. Because as we've had this situation in the past whereby, yes, that's a slight pothole there. Well, yes, but we would just normally, if it was a public right of way, a footpath still, an unmade farm track, we pour some GSB in it, some granular subbase, some stone, and that would be perfectly sufficient. On an estate road, that wouldn't be seen as perfectly as sufficient. And that higher standard of maintenance is what we're trying to make sure isn't left with the local authority and instead passed on to the management company.
Councillor Payne, then councillor Blakesby.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say that I'm instinctively uncomfortable with the idea of vehicles sharing a road with pedestrians and their dogs, because that's what we're talking about here, because I've looked at the map and people are going to be walking through with their dogs to get them out of fields. So the pedestrians may be very well behaved, but the dogs may not be particularly such. And I just instinctively feel that if you don't give people some steer as to where there's their side and where is not their side, you're setting up problems in the future.
Do you want to come back, Mr. Cook?
Again, I'm happy to take any particular recommendations with regards to marking the committee would like to make. In terms of their side, given that the whole width will be the public footpath, strictly speaking, they can choose whichever side they like and vehicles will need to give way to pedestrians. I appreciate It will be a low, as we've said, it's an estate road, very short distance. Best will in the world, you'd struggle to reach any significant speed on it.
Could I just
Yeah,
say,
please do.
I take your point, but in my experience, half a ton of metal on the wheels, and the pedestrian doesn't tend to come off well.
So Blanksby?
Yes, just to make sure that the actual footpath is maintained in perpetuity. It would be better for the county council to adopt the roads and to put 15 years maintenance.
It's not enough. Can I just come back?
Yes, please do.
I do appreciate what you're saying, but obviously when we adopt roads, I mean, it's only going to, is it only going to serve about 7 properties, did you say? Which obviously under the Highway Act. Yeah, it wouldn't be feasible to do so.
Councillor Gordon Brown.
This point on the marking it in some way, I think it's important. I think a couple of other councils have indicated concern about it. And I appreciate it's got to be in a subtle way because this is in fact a residential area. We don't want, big yellow lines up the middle of the road. But on the other hand, if you look at the map of this, there is a clear chance of vehicles coming off the side streets, because there's 2 side streets that are not part of the right of way, that could be blind and could be turning out into a location where people are walking up, particularly 10 years from now, once the vegetation has grown up, it might be a different proposition from what we see here on the plans today. So I think that's the concern we have down the road. How do we make sure that people driving do give way to pedestrians?
I mean, I can't give you any sort of definitive, this will make drivers give way to pedestrians. What I'm not sure whether it's something that's ever been considered is whether any form of traffic calming. I mean, traffic calming seems strange on such a short road where speeds are not, you wouldn't expect speeds to be very high anyway. But in my experience, physical measures are the only absolutely guaranteed way to ensure that speeds are remain low.
I think we probably moved to a proposal. Again, I mean, I know over the years, Mr. Cook, that you have been very protective, shall we say, of footpaths and in particular any alterations. I think members have expressed their concerns, but if we could have a proposal, please. Councillor Gordon Brown.
Again, can I propose as on the agenda this evening, but with just one caveat that the officer has further discussions with the developer to see what we can do about ensuring the pedestrians are made as safe as possible, recognising all the limitations there might be.
So basically you're proposing approval with that one caveat.
Please.
Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Payne, and those in favour, please.
It's unanimous, Chair.
Unanimous, thank you very much indeed. So if we can go on to the Hackney carriage, which is item 5, and we've got a remote attendance, I think.
Angie, are you there?
Hi, yes, I'm just was trying to get off mute. Sorry about that.
Yours unmuted. Yours unmuted.
Yeah, so I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Speakers on, click share. Your speakers on, click share.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so
Hello, good evening, and if we can move, this is very much part of the beginning of the process. I would suggest that we hear the officer's report, and unless there's any major thing, we move on because it's, as I say, part of the beginning of a long process. So if we could come over to you, please, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The report really is letting the committee know that a consultation is about to begin on a new carriage and private hire licensing policy, which will bring together under one single policy all the various terms and conditions and guidance and information regarding licensing of taxis under one umbrella of a single unified policy.
We're
So
just checking the technology and finding a difficulty to hear at the moment. We'll come back to you as soon as we've got some further communication.
Okay.
Think we're a bit there. We'll try again.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me now?
Just.
Yeah, I think we're going a bit better. Yes.
Oh.
Carry on anyway, please.
Okay, the purpose of the report is to inform the committee of our intention to take to do a consultation on a new policy that will cover taxi licensing. So the report sets out the main contents of the new draft policy. It is appended the draft policy for your information, and also identifies the stakeholders we will be consulting, and we propose to begin the consultation after PERDA for a period of 4 to 6 weeks. And then we will bring a consultation summary document back to this committee for your consideration.
Fine. Are there any questions from members? I'll say this is very much the beginning of a process. Councillor Gordon Brown.
As you expect me to do so, Chair. This particular subject was close to my heart because I brought it to Cabinet 4 years ago. So I was directly involved in the early days of it. My first question is, why are we not asking for comment about CCTV being included in vehicles? Here's an opportunity to consult, not just with the taxi operators, but with the public as well. And we're saying, well, we're really not going to make it mandatory. I wonder what our public think, whether it should be made mandatory or not. And I think we're losing an opportunity for another 5 years or so before we can go back and ask that question again. So that's my first point. Why not CCTV being consulted upon? Second point is in paragraph 4.3, we should talk about town and parish councils and parish meetings, not councillors. That's an error on that part. And then in the appendices, we talk about accepting cheques. And I'm sure if a former director, Section 151 officer was here tonight, he would be tearing his hair out of that, though he didn't have a lot. He'd be tearing his hair out at the possibility of cheques. And I would have thought that we would not want to put that in a consultation if in some very close future we were not accepting cheques. We should be really looking for electronic transfer. So those are the key points in terms of the preparation for the consultation. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that we're prejudging anything in the consultation, but I think we should try and make it as wide as possible and correct for the council on those points, Chair.
Councillor McCarthy.
Thanks, Chair. I think the point raised about CCTV is an excellent one. It's something I'd really like to see as well. We had a really nasty incident, so a public order incident in the Martinsthorpe ward, which you probably know about, which was, and that was in a taxi, and I don't know whether am I out of order in quoting this or not, I don't think I am. The driver was found to be distributing some fairly indecent material, and had we had access to an onboard CCTV dash cam sort of thing, it would have been brought to a conclusion much more swiftly. And so I think there's an excellent case for it. I think it's something we ought to send back to be included in this policy.
Thank you. Any other members? I mean, we are talking about the broad terms of the policy at the moment rather than the detail. So are there any other questions members would like for the officer, or can we move to the proposal, which you'll note it is consulting on the draft highway, and then it comes back to committee in the summer, and that is still part of the process. And I take your point about it. The sooner the better, or the clearer the better. Yes.
The officer doesn't come back on that.
Sorry.
The officer doesn't want to come back.
Would you like to come back?
I would if I can. If I can reassure members that it's not that we are not going to consider CCTV during this next 5 years. Actually, what we want to do is to get the policy in place, but we do believe that CCTV inclusion will be contentious and may delay the implementation of the overall policy. So it is our intention to consult on CCTV in licensed vehicles during this policy period, and it would, you know, we could even do it in within the first year, for example, to consider the inclusion of CCTV as a condition. So I would like to reassure members that we are aware of the value of CCTV, but it would not be a unanimous view that CCTV would be a good idea. We believe that there will be a mixed bag of opinion and view of the benefits. So it is one that we would consult upon during the 5-year policy period, not after 5 years, if you see what I'm saying.
Thank you. Councillor Payne.
I'm not sure if I entirely heard that correctly. Did I hear that the lady say that CCTV is not unanimously agreed as being a good thing? Because my experience is that's not the case. It is unanimously agreed as being a good thing, particularly for the protection of women travelling alone. And that's why it's been introduced in so many taxis around the country.
Did you want to come back on that one?
I think if we would want to introduce the CCTV, we will do it within the policy period, and it may well be that we get great support for the CCTV installation, in which case it can be introduced as a condition during the lifetime of the policy.
That's satisfactory. Thank you. Councillor Gordon Brown.
Chairman, my first comment was not that it should be in here as part of the policy. What I said was, wouldn't it be a good idea to say to whoever we're consulting with right now, if we were to introduce this, what would your views be? That's what consulting is about. And I just thought it was an opportunity now not to be missed.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Yep. Do you want to come back again on that one?
No, I agree. So we can consider including the CCTV as part of the consultation, I think.
I think that's, well, raise the issues. Thank you. So could I have a proposal, please? Again, in line.
We're just noting to it.
Sorry.
It's just for noting, so it needs to.
Yeah.
It's just for noting members, so there's no recorded vote needed or a vote at all, sorry.
We are noting it. We don't even have to take a vote. How splendid, right? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your remote attendance.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Cook. Thank you. And so we now move on to the planning application, item 7. And we have in fact got, I think it's 3 petitions. So I'll let Mr. and then move straight on to the representations. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The application before you this evening is a proposal for the construction of 8 new dwellings comprising 5 bungalows and 3 two-storey houses with formation of a new access onto Main Street to the south of the Lodge Trust premises at Market Overton. Just to give you a sort of a brief outline, the application site is located in the corner of a field to the south of the Lodge Trust buildings. There is a substantial mature tree line to the west boundary of the site. And as you can see from the plan here, the proposal is for 4 properties either side of a central access road. With an aerial photograph to sort of try and explain the position of the site, you can see there along the western boundary the row of mature trees which extends north beyond the site boundary. The Lodge Trust premises is the complex to the north of the plan here. And access would be taken directly onto Main Street from the south here. The road here leads to Cottesmore, with Main Street here running then through into the main part of Market Overton. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. So I've got Mr. Hills waiting. And again, you have 3 minutes and 3 minutes for questions. So over to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, right. Good evening. Good evening, councillors. Thanks very much for hearing me this evening. My name is Tim Hills. I simply come here as a member of the public. I live in Market Overton. I've lived there for about 30 years. And I feel that I know the village rather well, and I know the people of the village rather well as well. Please forgive me while I read from my notes. Obviously, we all know that new housing is going to be required in every corner of the UK in the foreseeable future. There's no reason why Market Overton should be an exception. I think wherever we go, and I'm sure as councillors you know about this, there's building going on everywhere. The proposed development is very much within the spirit of the Market Overton neighbourhood plan, and it would provide some very attractive houses and bungalows on what at the moment is a pretty scruffy field, I have to say. Apologies to Mr. Hutton, who is actually the owner of the field. The houses and bungalows are a pleasing design, and I'd like to congratulate the architects on their excellent work on this planning application. Now, the demographic of Market Overton, with about 26% of the residents over the age of 65, sadly that includes me as well, means that the provision of the number of bungalows would enable the elderly residents of the village to downsize within their own community, and thus releasing larger properties for families with children to move into our lovely village. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we need children and young couples and young people in Market Overton. The village is well served. It's got a great shop, a really good pub, a bowls club, a cricket club, and all sorts of other facilities. And of course, a lovely historic church. All these services need new, young, dynamic residents in order to survive, and obviously survive onto the future as well. This proposed development is modest in scale, and therefore will not shockload such services as the village surgery or the school bus, and the proposed access road is unlikely to cause traffic congestion issues. I know a lot of folk in the village. I talk to people all the time, and unusually for this particular application, I've yet to hear anyone speak against this proposal. No one in the village, and therefore I offer it my wholehearted support. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? If you'd like to stay, Mr. Hills, for the moment, thank you. No, Councillor Gordon Brown.
Thank you. The question of you in regard to the recent neighbourhood plan referendum. Am I correct in saying that 100 people voted in favour of the plan and 6 people voted against it?
Indeed, it wasn't a particularly good turnout, I have to say. But actually, yes, of the 500 or so in village.
Can I finish my question?
Oh, good.
All right. I think 100 to 6. The turnout actually was quite good. I've seen much worse around the country, so that's not really the point I was raising. The point I'm raising is that within the neighbourhood plan, it was quite clear that the plan limits of development should be retained, and that was quite clearly stated in the plan. Why are you suggesting that you should go against 100 people that voted in favour of that particular position?
Okay, are you talking about the fact that the limit of planning should be retained? Yes, I think that it's obviously that particular I think that particular boundary, which I think you're about to hear about, it will only exist until 2026, and then it's going to be redrawn anyway, as far as we know. It is true this development is just outside the planned development area of the village. I don't think the people were voting against any further development outside the planning area. I think they were voting for some development without really thinking very much about the planning area. That's my opinion.
Other members? In that case, thank you very much, Mr. Hill. Thank you. Please, on behalf of the Market Overton Parish Council, thank you. Okay. Councillor Dale.
Not pecuniary or anything.
I think you're declaring acquaintanceship on a matter of property rather than any particular. Yes.
Likewise, then,
Councillor Andrew Brown.
Good evening, Andy Williamson, Chair, Market Overton Parish Council. The current local plan defining the existing limit of planned development expires in 2026. The withdrawn local plan review 2013-2036 concluded site MAR 04 was the most suitable for future housing development in Market Overton. This site is outside the limits of the current local plan. The Parish Council accepts that site MAR 04 will, given the rigorousness of this site appraisal dated July 2017, most certainly be the chosen development site within the village of any local plan post 2016. It is also the preferred site listed in our newly made neighbourhood plan. The application site under consideration tonight is situated between site MAR 404, which is that line of houses to the extreme left, going to the red line and upwards of the tree line. That is MAR 04. And the line straight down those houses is the limit of planned planning as it stands at the moment. In any local plan post 2026, the limit of planned development will need to be changed eastward to incorporate development site MAR 04. Therefore, given this probable change and the short 3-year time period involved, we request committee to consider this aspect if minded to disallow the application on the grounds of being beyond the existing plan limits of development. Parking and access for emergency vehicle issues, tree shading issues, affordable housing contribution issues have been addressed by the applicant. The Parish Council actively supports future housing development within the village, providing developments comply with our newly made neighbourhood plan. We believe this development meets the requirements of our plan. Mr. Hills has already discussed various aspects of people within the village, so I'll miss that bit out. The village has a community shop and public house. Both of these have struggled during the pandemic. Loss of these amenities would be a major blow to the village. Future housing development will enable population growth, which in turn would, amongst other things, increase the chance of survival of these valued assets. Thank you.
Very much. Members. Councillor Gordon Brown.
I'll come back and ask the same question.
Yes.
Given that the parish council is the accountable body for a neighbourhood plan, I'm struggling to understand why you didn't call for sites and have this site allocated along with the other site, MR4, M04, I think it is, at the time of the neighbourhood plan, because clearly that then would have had the full support of the village, and we wouldn't be sitting here tonight. It would have been passed by the planning officers as a matter of routine. Is this not a premature application?
At the time we did the neighbourhood plan, we didn't have the facilities or the expertise to do a planning as appraisal, site appraisals, etc. And we didn't have support from planning either at that time because nothing was happening. So we then made our plan based on a preferred site, which was MAR 04, but of course it's when was withdrawn. So we were left with having to go, we had based our neighbourhood plan on what was probably going to be the local plan review, but that was withdrawn. So then we had to start again and say, okay, we've now got to go back to the existing plan, which we weren't anticipating at that time. It's still, what we're considering is, we know that come 2016, that field there will be built on. Well, we're pretty sure it will be anyway. So we're looking at that and this other one as an infill between that one and the Lodge Trust, which will make a natural boundary end of the village to the other side of the Lodge Trust. Are you happy with that or not? I'm sure you're not, but that's what you're going to get.
As a champion for neighbourhood plans, I find your response is surprising.
Any other members, any questions? In that case, thank you very much indeed. And I will ask Mr. Taylor, the agent, to come forward, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. Since the council withdrew its emerging local plan in September 2021, members of this committee have determined numerous housing applications that have been the subject of widespread objection from residents and parish councils. Members have also raised concerns over the lack of engagement with local stakeholders, with the perception that development is being forced upon communities. In this respect, the application before members this evening is markedly different. Notwithstanding the council's housing land position, this application has no objections from any residents, meets an identified local need, and, as you've already heard, has the full support of Market Overton Parish Council and local residents. Members will note that the Market Overton Neighbourhood Plan went to referendum last month and was overwhelmingly approved and is now made. Little regard is given to the Neighbourhood Plan in the committee report, and no conflict is found with it within the suggested reasons for refusal in front of you. Policy MOP1 of the Neighbourhood Plan relates to dwelling sizes and types and identifies a need for 2 and 3 bed dwellings, particularly bungalows. You have already heard from the Chair of the Parish Council that, in the parish's opinion, and contrary to the addendum report, the application goes towards meeting that identified need, and there are no available sites within the Market Overton Plan and its development that could accommodate this need. On this basis, it is clear that this development is compliant with the Neighbourhood Plan and would not set a precedent elsewhere. This is a significant material consideration in the planning balance and one that has clearly been overlooked. The Council's 2012 Landscape Sensitivity Capacity Study establishes that the application site lies within an area of low landscape sensitivity and value with high capacity to accommodate development. The committee report suggests that the application site appears separate from the main built part of the village. The Parish Council disagree with this assertion, and crucially, this conclusion is not supported by the Neighbourhood Plan. The Neighbourhood Plan identifies several key views in and out of the village, and contrary to the addendum reports, none of which relate to the application site, a point that the authors of the Neighbourhood Development Plan, the parish, agree. Otherwise, they wouldn't have supported the proposal and consider it to comply with their own neighbourhood plan. In respect to the impact on protected trees, the development from its first iteration has been designed to safeguard these trees. The committee report raises concerns that future occupiers would attempt to undertake works to the trees. This is conjecture. The supporting daylight sunlight report that confirms all 4 dwellings adjacent to the tree belt meet the BRE guidance for sunlight provision. I'd like to finish by quoting members' own words in considering an application in Market Overton back in November 2021. These include, and I quote, "There is a need for 2, 3 and 4 bed houses and the local needs of our community are not being met. We must take a measured and on balance decision. We normally have objections. Here we have the opposite. The parish council is in support, as are the neighbours. I will be voting in favour on balance." And I'll finish on the words of Councillor Baines at that committee. Planning has 2 processes, the officers and the council members. If it was as simple as following the officer recommendation, then there would be no need for a committee. We must exercise the views of local communities and exercise our own judgment. Therefore, as set out previously, both the applicant and the parish council consider the development to meet an identified need in a sustainable location and as such compliant with the neighbourhood plan. This is a significant material consideration weighing in favour of approving the application, which we invite members to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to ask you a question for clarification. I mean, quite clearly, you're aware of what I'm about to say, that there is a national policy framework, there is a local plan, and there would then be a call for sites. And I wondered why this hierarchy didn't seem to be followed in this application.
In respect of the call for sites for the new local plan, this site has been put forward, but regardless of that, you've heard from the parish council, the adopted neighbourhood plan identifies a need for approximately 30 dwellings in the village. And as you've heard from the parish, and as I've stated previously, there is no room as such within the plan limits development to accommodate those 30 houses that is identified as being needed as part of the now made neighbourhood plan. So I think there's probably 2 elements to that. It has been submitted into call for sites, but there is an identified need now in Market Overton, which is set out in a made neighbourhood plan and supported by the parish council.
And the fact that the housing supply has altered in the intervening time hasn't altered your position.
No, sir. As I said before, we consider the application to be compliant with the neighbourhood plan, which forms part of the development plan. And so, regardless of the land supply position, there is that development plan support for the proposal.
Other members? Councillor Andrew Brown and then Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions regarding the trees. They seem to be in the almost in the hedge line there. Who actually owns the trees?
The trees are owned by the applicant.
Right. And the next question is how are these trees going to be protected? I know you say you're going to protect them, but are you happy with a TPO being put on them?
Yes, so a provisional tree preservation order has already been placed on the trees. One was placed on about 2 years ago, which was allowed to lapse. That's now been placed on again as a provisional trees preservation order, and the applicant has no issue whatsoever with that being confirmed. He's more than happy for that to be there so that those trees are protected.
I've got Councillor McCarthy, then Councillor Gordon Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. One of the main issues raised by Highways was was the poor access and turning ability for refuse vehicles, and I'm a little bit surprised to see that you haven't done anything to address that in the interim between us hearing about that and tonight.
You'll note from the addendum report that that has actually been addressed, and the revised layout plan addresses that matter.
Councillor Gordon Brown, then Councillor Beggy.
In reading the documentation, it appears that there are no plans for affordable housing. This surprises me that the parish council is prepared to support something that doesn't provide social housing or affordable housing. Is that the case? There's no affordable housing on this site?
So the made neighbourhood plan identifies that for proposals between 6 and 9 dwellings, rather than seeking on-site affordable housing, a contribution should be made for off-site affordable housing, which the applicant is more than content to do so, and that has always been communicated to the council, and we're happy to enter into section 106 agreement to facilitate that.
I understand there's no section 106 agreement agreed between yourself and the council at this stage.
If you want me to come back on that, not at this stage,
Mr. Burrow.
given the recommendation. There isn't an agreement in place at this point, but we have been in discussion with the agent with regard to the fact that if members were minded to approve the application this evening, then discussions would take place along that line, and a section 106 agreement would be prepared.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Beggy and Councillor Payne. I am going to let the timing overrun a little bit to make sure that members have the questions that they want to ask. Councillor Beggy.
Yeah, thank you. Just for clarity, was it mentioned by, I'm not sure you or the other deputies, that the site to the top left would also be forward for development?
That was an emerging allocation in the previous iteration of the local plan. That has a pending application at the moment outlined for up to 27 houses, but has yet to be determined.
So the question was more to do with, we've just said that you're quite happy to put TPOs in all those trees. So therefore, where will the access into that new development be?
So in looking at the point of access as part of its emerging allocation, it was proposed to put the access from the south, and that was found that the access could be achieved without having harm to the trees. And I am actually the agent for that application as well. And I know that the access road has been produced that is fully outside the root protection area of those trees as well.
Okay, so it goes between those trees.
It does, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. Can you just confirm that the heating of these houses will not involve fossil fuels in any way?
I'd imagine there will be some element of that, but we've gone to good to lengths to try and mitigate that. 3 of the bungalows have solar panels, and we're more than happy to consider any conditions in respect of alternative means of power.
Thank you, Chair. We are increasingly moving in Rutland towards no fossil fuels heating properties of any sort. Heat pumps, solar panels, these are more likely to be acceptable as far as I'm concerned. You might want to take that on board.
Thanks, sir. And yes, certainly we're more than flexible on that.
Councillor Banks.
Yeah, we aren't stating the obvious. Is this development going to be managed in a management company? And if so, it brings a question of the trees again up.
Thank you. No, it won't. The road will be adopted and brought up to constructed to an adoptable standard, and the tree belt, each portion of garden will be apportioned to those houses.
Thank you.
Very much indeed, members. Thank you very much indeed. And I'll now turn to Mr. Thrower to give the detailed proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If I just sort of address a couple of points that have come up through the questions before I continue. The application that's referred to in the forthcoming allocation is this site here, which does extend further to the north. There is a pending application on that site at present. It isn't in a position where officers have made a recommendation, and therefore it's not in a situation where we could say that there will definitely be a permission forthcoming on that site. Equally, we couldn't say that there will definitely not be an application forthcoming. So in terms of your consideration, yes, there is an application. It's still ongoing. There is some reference also to the key views within the neighbourhood plan. I have got a photograph that I'll show you later on through the presentation of one of those key views, but it's identified as key view E within the neighbourhood plan, and it's taken from the Cottesmore Road, looking across the south side of the village in this direction, and we'll see later on what that view actually shows. The housing that you can see to the west of the site here is an exception site that was approved some years ago. That was 100% of affordable housing site. That lies outside the plan limits of development as well. As I say, it was granted at that time as an exception to the policy because it was 100% affordable housing. And the only other thing I would ask members to note at this stage is the aerial photograph, as we've seen, shows the tree line running along the western boundary. It does also show the current extent of shading that those trees provide across the site. This is the plan taken from the neighbourhood plan, detailing the plan limits of development of the village of Market Overton. You can see the site in the bottom right corner outlined in red here. And this is the extent of the application site that we just mentioned that is currently pending, with access taken between the application site and the affordable housing site down here. You will note from this plan the detachment of the site from the planned limits or the existing limits of the development of the village. We have obviously heard from some of the speakers about the potential for other sites to be included within the plan limits at some point in the future. But obviously I'll remind members that that is a decision that hasn't as yet been taken and would be considered as part of the preparation of the forthcoming local plan. I won't delay you too long on the plans of the actual properties proposed. You'll note from the report that officers don't consider that the design of the properties is an issue. In this instance, they are appropriate to the historic traditions of Market Overton. The actual layouts and designs of the properties are also fairly similar between the 5 bungalows or 4 of the 5 bungalows and the 3 two-story properties. So to see one is to sort of give you an impression of the entire development. As you can see, the 2-story properties come with double garages. With parking on the front, their driveways as well. And then again, with the bungalows, you can see there's a certain consistency of design approach. This is a computer-generated image of the development that the agent has requested was included within the presentation. It doesn't show the bungalow plot 1 to the left-hand side of that picture. You can obviously see the 3 two-story properties that are further into the site, and then some of the 4 bungalows off to the right-hand side and the central access road. There's been some reference to the landscape capacity and sensitivity study. In particular, the fact that the application site was assessed as area M03. Area M03 you can see on the right-hand side of the screen here. The blue outline is the application site. As you can see, area M03 also incorporates considerable amounts of land around the Lodge Trust and also the adjacent site that's currently got the pending application on it. In that respect, we would say that whilst the overall capacity and sensitivity of area M03 is cited within the study document, the impact of the development of this particular part of it may be very different to the consideration of the development of the whole of that site. It should also be noted that within that capacity study, the tree line that forms the western boundary of the site and extends to the north was specifically identified by the consultant as a key local landscape feature that assisted in the delineation or demarcation, should we say, of the built up part of the village from the countryside beyond. Moving on to the key view that I referenced earlier from the Cottesmore Road leading towards Market Overton. This is, as best as I can establish, what that key view shows from the Market Overton neighbourhood plan. This is the south side of the village that's referenced within key view E text. And you may just be able to make out the power lines running across the top of the image, leading to a pylon in this location here, which is to be moved to form part of the access to the site. So the purple highlighted area there is, as best as I can establish, where the frontage of the site would be located in relation to key view E. Now, the trees along the frontage of the site are proposed to be retained, but we'll see views of the frontage of the site from closer in a moment. This is the actual a close-up picture of the frontage, and members will note the overall feel of the application site at present. It is an agricultural, essentially, field with trees surrounding it, and an absence of built-up development in this particular location. Now, further to the east, we do have the access to the Lodge Trust. It is accepted that the Lodge Trust complex is located beyond the plan limits of development. However, obviously it is historic premises that has been adapted for its current use. The key differentiation between the application site and the Lodge Trust complex itself is the impact, if you like, on the immediacy of the road. The Lodge Trust is located quite some considerable distance away from the road to the north, whereas the proposed application site, as you've seen from the original plan layout, is accessed directly off that road. I've then got two slides that show the built-up nature of the village beyond the western boundary of the application site. This is looking west into the village. And as you can see, whilst we've still got sort of a very rural style of development, we've already introduced quite a considerable number of buildings into the roadscape there. And then looking back slightly from a little bit further on, you've got the affordable housing scheme to the left, looking back out to the east, and the access to the adjacent application site is in approximately that location. I'm not going to go through the detail of the policies. They are set out in the report. In principle, however, we have an application site that lies outside the plan limits of development, and therefore in planning policy terms could be considered countryside. There is an adjacent residential housing scheme that was approved as an exception site in accordance with the exceptions policy at that time. This proposal, however, does not accord with any of the exceptions to restrictions on development in the countryside as set out within the current local plan. And the tilted balance is not considered to apply following confirmation from the planning policy team that the LPA can demonstrate a 6-year housing land supply. The dwellings themselves are considered to be of an appropriate design for the area. However, the layout itself does result in limited amenity provision for those properties, in particular the gardens of the properties along the western half of the application site. Officers do consider that development of the site would result in some harm to the character of the area due to the visual impact of the proposals and their location to the east of that tree line that was identified within the landscape sensitivity study, as forming that soft delineation between the built-up part of the village and the wider countryside. And we also consider that the site lies within the scope of key view E from the neighbourhood plan, resulting in changes to the character of the village when viewed from this direction. Members will probably note there isn't actually a landscape impact reason for refusal before you this evening, but dependent on your consideration of the application, you may wish to consider, if you wish to refuse the application, whether or not you wish to add in a landscape reason for refusal at this point. Finally, the amenity of the proposed properties. It is accepted that the gardens of the properties to the east half of the development are not large, and that to a certain extent that is within the scope of anyone wishing to purchase one of those properties, to make that judgment as to whether or not the gardens are large enough for them and what they how they foresee occupying the property. However, in particular, officers consider the 4 plots on the western half of the site will have poor levels of residential amenity within those rear gardens due to the proximity of the mature trees and the shading impacts that they will have on that garden area. In conclusion, therefore, the development site lies in the countryside beyond the limits of the village, where development is required to be justified under special circumstances. The scheme would also be readily apparent in views of the village from the south and the southeast, and officers consider that no such special circumstances have been identified in this instance. The proposed dwellings will experience limited amenity levels within their garden, or at least half of them, in particular, due to a combination of the size of those gardens and the impact of the trees on the western boundary of the site. The application is therefore recommended for you for refusal, subject to amendment by the addendum report, removing refusal reason 2, which was highways reason for refusal, which has been overcome following the original writing of the report and the meeting this evening. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Blacksby, I saw you earlier. Is this a question of fact for the officer? I mean, I'll bring you into the debate later, but if it's a question of
Well, it probably
clarification.
could answer it for me. Is the reason for not having photovoltaics on the roof on the south side, I think it is it that because of the shading of the trees?
I couldn't speak as to the choice of the architect as to why they haven't put photovoltaics on all of the properties. And that's
That
obviously
seems to be the
choice
reason,
that
because
they
it's all
made.
shaded, isn't it?
I'm going to the debate in later because I'm going to ask Councillor McCartney as the ward member to lead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Harvey's here as well in attendance. I don't know whether Sam, do you wish to speak at some point? Okay, thanks. Ooh, sorry, that was a bit louder than I thought. Members, this is a difficult one, and Cottesmore ward is an unusual ward insofar as the two villages are very, very different communities. Cottesmore is almost genetically opposed to the principle of development anywhere. Whenever you talk to anybody in the village, Market Overton is a completely different picture. And as you've heard tonight from some residents, I don't know of anybody that has spoken against this application, and certainly I'm aware of broader support within the village for this. It seems to me that where we have a community in support of something like this, it is a little counterintuitive of us to reject it. But that said, I'm in two minds as to about this myself. I do feel that if the village want this development, then we perhaps ought to allow it. At the same time, I acknowledge all the reservations that the planning officer has expressed, and there are some good reservations there. So this is one reason why I think it would be excellent if we could have a committee judgment on this, because I think this really does need our consideration. I will speak further on this later, but I'd like to bring in a debate. That's why it's here.
Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. I'm slightly nonplussed because I'm a bit concerned that we might be setting up a precedent here because this development is outside the line that's already been agreed in the neighbourhood plan. Actually, it feels to me like 5 years ahead of itself in some ways. But equally, I can understand that from what my colleague Councillor McCartney is saying, if the local population and the parish council are in favour of it, then yes, it does seem slightly counterintuitive to let it down. But I am concerned that if we say, okay, it's all right this time, yet what happens the next time? That's my real concern about, that's what precedent, and since all the law of England tends to be based on precedent, I'm a bit concerned about what we might be giving ourselves for the future. Thank you, Chair.
Got Councillor Harvey indicating from a distance, but I'll just take as ward member before I take the next planning member.
Thank you very much, Chair, and apologies, I wasn't going to speak, but I will just say a few words if I can. This is, as we've heard, an unusual one, where the community is in favour of development and our planning officers are against development. What I would say and what I would draw members' attention to is two previous things that have come through this committee. As you could see in the photos, the current planned limits of development in Market Overton are very, very snug to the village itself and to the built village, and doesn't actually allow any room for future development. If you look, there is barely any movement there. So it stands to reason that those PLDs are going to have to move. I take Councillor Brown's comments regarding the neighbourhood plan, but I would say to the committee that, as we know, neighbourhood plans are designed by our parish councils and by our communities. Some are much stronger in their knowledge than others. And so I would caution to what would seem to penalise one of our less knowledgeable parish councils and neighbourhood plans, possibly. The neighbourhood plan is very good. We know from the withdrawn local plan that the big field was going to be built on, and it will come forward. And so it seems to me that actually it won't be while it be outside, it won't be kind of on its own in countryside. It's very close. We have the committee did agree another building which would be, sorry, here there is an application was agreed by the committee outside the PLD just there for that was a Class Q application that I asked to bring to committee. And that was approved. It's also worth noting, and again, if I could have the liberty to show you on the maps, here, if members of the committee remember, was the big the chick rearing facility, which is actually already, one could argue, spoiled the view there because it sits on. With regard to view E that looks across, it does actually look across, and for those of the committee who might know Market Overton would know that as you're driving down the Cottesmore Road and you look across, there is always a beautiful sunset to the left across the open fields, and actually, so the natural view, again, is actually this way, that's right there. So the only big room, because the sunset here, and there is a stunning view of open fields to there. So I would just bring those few points up, and I would thank the committee for that. Thank you.
Members, Councillor Beggy.
Thank you. Of course, it's a difficult decision, and we have to make decisions based on planning facts, and the opinions of residents, etc. is it only part of that? So we have to take everything into consideration. What I'd like actually from our legal representative for officers, some real clarity over the position of the neighbourhood plan and the PLD, because it is against the neighbourhood plan, where everybody says, and it is outside the plan limits development. And as Ray, I'm very concerned about what this does in setting precedent for other villages, which is a real concern. And if the village were minded the other way, they would certainly be quoting the fact that it's outside the PLD as a reason for refusal, as we've seen on many occasions. My other point, which is slightly connected as well, is I really can't see how this is not going to have a major visual impact on the entrance to a beautiful village. I speak from some experience, as one of my villages had a contested site which was approved at judicial inquiry, which in my opinion has blighted the entrance to that village. So I do think we have to take that view into account as well. So if I could have some clarity on some of those points, it'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Chairman, can I just answer just the
Mr.
point
Johnson.
on the PLD? I think Councillor Beggie's right. In terms of the neighbourhood plan doesn't set out or allocate any further sites for development. And so the site is contrary to policy. My opinion is that the correct approach is if the parish do want to promote that site, then it would be through part of the current local plan process and the calls for sites, as the agent said, that they have also done that. That is the correct way about going to plan developments. The agent did make reference to the withdrawn local plan, and that the site adjacent was to be allocated, I think, as part of that local plan. But as has been stated, it was withdrawn. It has no weight. The council is going back to the beginnings and fully assessing sites from basically a blank canvas. So my opinion is that this is premature, and that the most appropriate way forward is for that site to be allocated through the local plan process, go through the consultation of that. If it is allocated, then the applicant can come back in and it will get support from officers if it does get allocated. Thank you.
Can I just come back on that? Yeah, just one is the clarity on precedent and whether or not that has any weight in law, and just another couple of points of clarity, because Sam pointed out a couple of them. One, the class Q, which is under different rules outside of PLDs, and the other was an agricultural building, which also is different rules. So I can't really consider those in my thinking, but I am interested in precedent.
So,
Oh, sorry.
If I go in, I mean, I think the issue is, as I've said before, each application has to be looked at on its own merits when we're determining them. But I'm pretty sure that if this were allowed, that other developers would point it out and use it as an argument in other developments that come forward. And you're quite right, councillor, with regards to the other developments, class Q and agricultural developments fall under different policies.
Just so I'm clear, because this might have impact certainly on my villages and other people's. If we approved this and we refuse another one, they could bring this up at appeal as some sort of precedent.
Yes, yeah, I'm sure that it would be brought up and used as an argument against, and then it would be up for an inspector to see how much weight they decide to give to that argument.
Thank you.
I just want to come in because I think precedent is something that you all need to be very aware of. And when you mentioned it, because we've got to look at this, even though each one is looked on its own merits, we've got to have real cogent reasons why you are making this a particular exception and why you do believe it. So it's what planning reasons, and I don't think members have actually been discussing actually what that planning reason would be, other than the support of the local community. So I agree. I think you are be cautious if that's the reasons that you would be going for it.
Councillor Andrew Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. My concerns, along with those raised by Councillor Beggy, are more to do with the trees. I'm concerned over the level of shading of the trees, but obviously with the new development, we've got to have a biodiversity net gain, and with this amount of mature trees, there's going to be a significant amount of biodiversity there already. how are we going to ensure that the 5% or 15% or whatever it is of the biodiversity net gain, if we are minded to approve this, actually happens?
And just to come back on that, the agent has provided a biodiversity net gain plan. If members were minded to approve, then that would need to go before our ecologist for comment and to ensure that an appropriate management scheme was in place, either by condition or through the Section 106 agreement that we mentioned previously.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, I'm a great advocate of neighbourhood plans, as you are, Chair. And I'm very concerned. Had this been the Edith Weston plan, which was produced 10 years ago now, I could think, yeah, well, it's now out of date, and the residents have taken a different view from where we are today, and time's moved on. I'm actually shocked by the fact that here we are, less than a month after the village has approved this plan by 100 votes to 6 or thereabouts, that here we are, the residents are saying, oh, but we don't really want to work to the neighbourhood plan, we want to change it, and we want to do something quite different. So I'm concerned with that. I think also the big issue for me is the plan limits development. It's quite clear in our local plan that we do not accept development outside plan limits development except for exceptions. And I struggle to see the exception in this particular case. Had this been 50% affordable social housing, I could have been sitting here going, right, well, let's think about this very carefully. This is not the case. In fact, the council's going to get a small amount of money, and councillors know that this does not go to produce the three affordable homes that would normally be provided on a site like this. I know on a site in our village, there's 6 houses, of which 2 are effectively affordable, 1 actual and 1 being paid for separately. So I'm very concerned about that. I'm concerned, as Councillor Beggy said, about the potential impact on the view, again in the neighbourhood plan. This is not something which the County Council made up back in 2011 or 2014. This is something that the residents signed up to a month ago. And I disagree with the concept that the village was not knowledgeable. The village had the facility to spend £9,000 on extra advice to look at the potential for site allocations within their community. So I put that to one side and say, sorry, I fundamentally disagree with that. So my position is clear. This is outside plan limits development. It's not in line with the neighbourhood plan that's just been agreed within days. And I think this is premature. I think this should wait, this should be refused tonight, and it should wait until the call for sites is evaluated across the whole county. And once we see that, then we'll be in a position to say, yes, this might be the case. Or the village might want to go back and review their neighbourhood plan and have a call for sites and assess those appropriately. And this may be one of the sites which comes forward. There may be others. As we see on the call for sites, there's quite a few sites around the village that have now come forward in this last 6 or 9 months. So I think those are the points I'd make, Chair. Thank you.
Members? Councillor McCartney.
Thank you, Chairman. Much like Councillor Harvey, I struggle to get away from the fact that we have a community who seem to wish to be in support of a development. From us in the position of the local authority, we're confronted by applications for development all the time, and there are always, near enough without exception, objections. And we sit here at committee every month, sometimes several times a month, and we hear very cogent deputations from people who speak against applications. We've not got this here. We've got a real opportunity to take a small tranche of housing which has no objections and has the support of the community. I mean, as Sam said, that PLD line around that village there has no space for anything. I think if this were referenced in an appeal from a different applicant, if this was referenced, said, oh, well, you built outside your PLDs here, I think we would be on pretty strong grounds, and the inspector would be on pretty strong grounds saying, well, actually, okay, fine, yeah, it was outside the PLD, but this is an exceptional circumstance. There's nowhere else for development in that village, even the site which is admittedly under a separate application at the moment, which I suspect will be looked upon reasonably favourably. That's outside the PLDs as well. I don't see that as an issue. Well, it's certainly not an issue for me, knowing the village as Sam and I do. The natural feel of the village is not that black line on the eastern side there. The natural feel for the boundary of the village is actually to the east of the Lodge Trust. That is where, if you're driving in and out of the village, that is where you do feel that the village ends. And in that respect, this site and the caravan site next to it do feel very much as if they are within the village. So here we have a village coming to us saying, well, actually, we want these houses. I do accept that they are slightly premature, perhaps, but I would be struggling to vote against this application, I'm afraid, members.
I'm just to give you a little bit of clarity to that. I mean, obviously we're here, aren't we, to look at, we can take into account obviously what the local residents are saying, but anything, if you do anything exception, it's got to be cogent planning reasons. And I suppose your hat here is to look at it from a material planning consideration point of view, rather than just support of the residents. And that's not really, just in my view, a cogent planning reason for why you would support it.
Are there any other members? I have comments to make myself in a moment, but if any other member wants to come in before that, please do. Like Councillor Gordon Brown, I've always been a firm supporter of neighbourhood plans. I was chairman of the Uppingham Neighbourhood Plan. We had a similar application from a developer outside the planned limits of development, and we went to the High Court and won. Again, we've mentioned precedent earlier. I think, members, we've all been through, and this is not an easy decision, I don't pretend it is, but we've all been through the debate on the 5-year housing supply. The situation is now different. We've got a 6-year housing supply. And although we take the point that we consider every application on merit, one of the factors in this is undoubtedly the overall effect on the county were we to go forward and approve this. I think there is a very real difference to being in support of the principle, which I would certainly entirely accept from the community, that there is a need for this particular sort of housing in this particular village. The fact that the principle is no longer compatible with either national policy or local policy makes it very difficult for me to support this particular application. As I say, accept the principle, and depending on what the decision is this evening, were this to result in a return application in a different location, then we would start that afresh. But as it is, I would refer you to the addendum report, which considers several assertions which are not actually borne out by the situation. But in particular, I would suggest that we pay very full attention to the officer's conclusion in the recommendation for refusal. I will look for a proposal, and so we'll move on to that. Thank you. We'll have a proposal, please. Councillor Gordon.
I propose we follow the officer's recommendations, Chair. To refuse.
Have a second, councillor Branksby, and those in favour for the refusal as it stands with the officer's recommendation. Those in favour, please. And against?
It's 8-4-1 against, Chair.
So that is duly refused. And again, I would say to Market Overton, this application has been refused. It doesn't mean the principle of what you are seeking for the village is ruled out. Thank you very much indeed. And if you simply came for that item, I'll just give you a pause to remove. We've got a couple of other things to deal with. Yeah. Right, thank you. Thank you very much. If we could move on to the appeals report, please, Justin.
Sorry, Chairman.
That's just, and if that email that we had this afternoon, you probably didn't see it, so.
I haven't seen one. No.
Was,
Which email are?
well, it was saying that you answered to in the addendum tonight.
For the
Did you get a look at that beforehand? Before it came to us?
Yeah, I think it will have gone to Nick and myself.
You didn't actually send it a few days ago or anything?
I'm not sure how long in advance we had the appellant's comment.
I think it came from Friday.
Yes, yeah, so yeah, it was it
To you, Chair, I sent it to the marginal, so
was it Friday that it came to? Yeah, so I think that's we had
That's
it
all right.
Friday, and so that's why
I
we
just wondered if you'd answered it, because
yeah. Well, we've not gone back.
Submitted it, that was all.
Well, we've not gone back to them. It was they obviously circulated it to members. We responded in the addendum paper. That's how we dealt with that. Sorry, Chairman. The appeals. We've had no new submissions this time, but we have had one decision, which is at the top of page 144. This was at 39B Main Street, Whissendine. This was section 73 application to vary the condition. This was a change of use. Planning permission had been granted for a change of use from a shop to a takeaway. And the application sought to extend the opening hours to 10:30 every day. I think they were restricted to around 5 o'clock. We had concerns about the impact on residential amenity and that would have. The inspector agreed with us and dismissed the appeal. So that was a successful appeal decision.
Okay, members. Right, if we, do any of it, sorry, Councillor Branksby.
Yes, I noticed in this week's planning that came round that an application for a change of use 0239 at Goodwood House, Ackermore, and stating in it that they want to change the use to a furniture shop and a gym on one side. Furniture shop, it's already a furniture shop. It's already a furniture shop. They're already using it as a furniture shop.
I think it's just the description. I don't know the case specifically, but I think what they're trying to say is that it's a change of use from furniture shop to furniture shop and gym. But
yeah,
I'll
it does
have to check
actually
that out.
say that they're applying for permission to make it into a furniture shop. And
Yeah,
it's already a furniture shop.
Yeah, I think it's just the way that we have to do the descriptions, but I will check
Yeah,
that.
okay.
I've made a note. Thank you.
I've got, sorry, yes, I've got councillor Andrew Brown who put one bit of my urgent business, I'll then come to your bit of urgent business. Andrew, the
Yeah.
footpath.
Thank you, Chair. As most of you are probably aware, I chair the Rutland Countryside Access Forum, which is a statutory body the council has to have. We had a meeting last week, and this was regarding a footpath that was to be diverted by a developer in Langham, and the developer said that they were going to divert it around and that was all going to be fine. It turned out that that wasn't the case at all, and it could not be diverted where they wanted to put it. And that footpath has now got to be stopped up. And I wondered if there's any way we can ensure that when this scenario arises in the future, the footpath diversion is secure before we grant the planning permission, or make it a condition that the planning permission is granted via the security of the new footpath.
Okay, so this one is a bit of an unusual one because, like I say, the applicants had drawn up plans and we considered it to be acceptable. It then, when they were doing it on the ground, I think there was an issue that they had, which Stuart, who was here earlier, had looked at, and it wasn't feasible. We can't hold up the planning permission for it because effectively it's different legislation, and the applicant could appeal against non-determination. What we can do is seek to ensure that we have fully considered the potential impacts of any footpath diversion when we're considering the planning application. It's a material planning consideration. And myself and Stuart have had discussions recently with the wider team, and also with Penny and Ingrid, in terms of how we can better work together across our team. So we have set up additional consultation between the teams, but also additional consultation with wider groups as well. So forgive me, I can't tell you them off the top of my head, but there are a number of users of public rights of way, Bridles Ways, the Horse Society, that sort of thing, that we are now doing further additional consultation with on development. So hopefully that will pick it all up.
Okay, well, can the Countryside Access Forum then be one of the consultees, because that is sort of what it's for? We won't convene a meeting, but we'll just send it round to the members.
They may already be on our list now, but like I say, this is only fairly recently that we've set up. But Councillor, if you can send me the contact details for where the consultations need to go, I will.
Well, you can send them to me as the chair, and then I can distribute them, or send them to Stuart. He's the officer.
Countryside Access Group. I will make sure
Well,
that
it's Countryside Access.
Yeah, I think,
Forum.
yeah, I'm pretty sure he's given us the details already,
Yeah.
but I'll double check.
Okay, thank you.
I've got councillor Payne, councillor Beggy, councillor Gordon Brown.
I just keep mine brief. I saw an email late, because I'm one of these good boys and doesn't do my emails late, that we won, inspector agreed with us over a development in Langham when there was a dreadful black tarmac was going to go down in front of a very nice building, and this inspector dismissed it, and I feel very pleased about that.
Yeah,
well done.
That thank you. That was a good result for us, and we'll report that at next time's committee.
Councillor Beggy.
Justin, you thought it had gone away. The quarry. We know for a fact that as soon as we put the conditions down, particularly about the hedgerows and the environmental access reports needed, Mick George went and cut them down. Have you got any further with sending Mark out to have a look at what's happened? Because regardless of how minor a breach of condition it is, it's still a breach of conditions, and it's the thin end of the wedge as far as Mick George are concerned.
I'm aware of it. So I've got a couple of things that are going on with the quarry site at the moment. I'll chase up Mark because I've been on leave, so I sent it to him. So I don't. The honest answer is I don't know whether he's gone out there, but he's aware that made it very clear, we need to keep on top
Yeah,
of the
because
quarry.
off the back of that, they've already now say they want to move the crusher
I've seen that
somewhere else.
I've seen that as well, aware of that. There's also the issue about the fencing, which I had discussions with the environmental health manager, whose legislation the fencing issue would come under. And she went down and visited the site. I think it was Friday last week. So I just need to check my emails and see what her findings
So
were.
when you get
from
back,
that.
Justin, that's fine, but I know the committee's been very much involved in it, and I just wanted to point out that Mick George are already pushing the boundary.
I think that certainly, Councillor Baker, you're aware that the parish council and yourself are all are bringing it to me on a regular basis, and I can assure you it's very high on my priority list.
Thank you. I know it's not your fault, Justin, but Mick George are a pain.
I appreciate that, and we will make sure that they comply with the conditions. I know I was concerned that obviously this would come to this issue. That's why we put on a lot of conditions, and we will make sure they're complied with.
Thank you, Justin.
Councillor Gordon Brown.
Chairman, I don't know whether it's the appropriate time at this point of the meeting or whether we should wait till afterwards. But I believe that Nick Hodgett has retired.
Yes.
Or is retiring within the next few days. End of the month. And I thought it might be appropriate if the committee just acknowledges the long service that Nick has given to this council. And the time that he spent in this particular room over the years as well, and just wish him all the best in his retirement, and that record that in the minutes. I would have thought would be an appropriate thing to do.
I'm sure members would entirely agree with that. Does Nick happen to be presenting a report to the next meeting?
Nick will have left by the next committee because he leaves at the end of the month. But what I will do, I will circulate round to members details. We'll have a card in the office in the next couple of days for people to sign if they want to. But I'll also, if any member wants to send Nick a message, if they email it to me, I can make sure that it goes in. We're also doing a Word version that we can cut and paste into his card as well. So, but I will also pass on the message so that he can listen back to tonight's meeting and hear all the nice things that have been said. Thank you. 21 years. Yeah, it's a long time. You've definitely had the money's worth out of him, and I think he's looking forward to his retirement now.
I'm sure we'd all like to echo what you've said, Gordon. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. At that point, just short of 9:15, I will close the meeting. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you to officers.